So you now know a thing or two about the musical staff, the 5 lines and 4 spaces, and how consecutive letters go in consecutive slots. If you go up on the staff, you're going higher in pitch, and if you go down, you're going lower in the pitch. And you certainly know all about line notes and space notes and how they always have to alternate. But how do you know which note is going to be played with which key on the piano keyboard? In other words, how do you know which thing is a G, which thing is an A, which thing is a C? In the exercise towards the top of page 15, I just gave you that this is an E, this is an F. But the thing is, you will be able to tell which note is which if you pay attention to this symbol called a clef. And the first clef we're going to talk about is treble clef. So more generally, a clef, it's a symbol that gives a pitch reference point. So defining a particular line as C or maybe a particular line as G, it gives you 1 point of definition. So what does the treble clef do? Well, here's the treble clef in action. And what it does is it points us to the note G, and in fact, the note G above middle C. So let me go back a page. If this is your middle C right here, here is the G to the right of middle C. That's the key that the treble clef is pointing you to. Now, how is it doing that? Let me show you back on the page 15. This clef, you'll see, of course, it has a vertical line, but it also has this kind of spirally thing. And notice how that spiral is circling around this location here. It's really circling around and emphasizing the second line. So what it's doing is saying, I'm focused on this note here. And if you can believe it, way back in the day, the treble clef looks something kind of like that, which very roughly looks like a cursive capital G. And in fact, this clef evolved from the letter G. And what it's doing is it is not only emphasizing this location, but it is defining this location as G. So if we know that that note is G, we can figure out where every other note is on the staff. So let's turn the page and see how that works. Let me first show you, forget about this diagram for the moment. Here's that treble clef again. Here is that note G. That's the definition. That's what the treble clef defines for us. Now, when you go up to the very next slot, well, by rules of the staff, that note has to be A, right? And if we continue the trend, this one has to be B, this one has to be C, and so on. So we can figure out every single note on the staff, and even above and below. Now, one thing that you'll want to keep in mind is that you don't want to calculate from that G every single time. That's not terribly efficient. So what you want to do is just to memorize a few highlights. So let me finish off this little drawing here. So that note would have to be D, this note would have to be E, and hey, if we snuck in a note there on that space, that one would have to be F because it's 1 slot lower than the G. So yes, G is absolutely something that you should know, but even better than knowing just the G, you should know the 4 space notes of the treble clef. So here's a space note right there, there's another space note, there's another space note, there's another space note. So taken together, they give you the word face, F-A-C-E. And if you just memorize those 4 locations, you can figure out anything in the treble clef really pretty quickly, actually. And let me just be clear, this is the F above middle C, then this is the C that's higher than middle C. So if you want to orient yourself with the piano, you can do so. So using these 4 highlights, the face notes, as we said, you can figure out the name of any pitch, even if it isn't one of those space notes, so even if it doesn't belong to the word. So let's take a look at this note here. Well, it's on a line. We didn't memorize the line notes, but wait a second. We can figure out which notes of face it's close to. Well, we know here, this is face. Well, doesn't it look like it's in between that note and that note? Well, if it's in between C and E, well, certainly in musical alphabet terms, it's got to be the note D. So there's your answer. Pretty quickly found, I might add, because you knew face and you could use that to your advantage. Here is one other note to memorize. So if you memorize face, you can kind of keep that G in the back of your mind as well. But on top of that, memorize that this note here, that one ledger line note below middle C, below the staff is middle C. So whenever you see this note on the treble clef, that is your middle C. That is your point of reference on the piano keyboard. And just by the way, if you encounter really low notes on the treble clef staff, you can use middle C, in other words, this note here, as your point of reference. You don't necessarily need to go back up to the face notes because those are higher than what you might want. You might want to just relate it to the middle C. Now let's do a little bit of this next exercise together. If you feel like you're on top of the material, of course, you can do this right away. So let's write the names of the following pitches in treble clef. Again, just remember face, and you can derive everything from there, and I suppose you can also remember middle C. So here we have it. There is a note. Oh, that's one of the face notes, right? That's the second one, the second space note of the staff, so that's got to be A. That's another one of the face notes, right? So that is E. That is the 1, 2, 3, fourth space of the staff. Now, what about this one? This one's not part of face, but wait a second. We know this is a C, and we know this is an E in face. Up, so there's that D again. What about this note here? Well, it's not part of face, but there's an F, there's an A. What note in the musical alphabet comes between F and A? Well, that's G. F, of course, we know that from face. There's that middle C. Here we are with a relatively high line note. Well, let's think that one through. That one's not part of face, but that note has to be E from face. So if we go up from E, that has to be F. And then we realize, oh, well, we could just go up one more to figure out that last one, which is indeed G. All right, now going on to number 2, this is where I recommend not writing anything down, just doing this exercise aloud. Because you can use this a number of times. Just keep referring back to it as we go through the course. This is a great way to practice treble clef. So you want to go for speed and accuracy. And believe me, this is one of those things that's so crucial in the class. You got to just know your treble clef notes and your bass clef notes like the back of your hand. So you want to get to the point where you can basically do it at this speed. A, B, G, F, E, E, C, D, F, A, G, B, F. For the first line, and then a similar speed for the second line. Now, at first, you're going to want to think things through. You're going to want to just relate everything to face. Once you get comfortable with that, you'll start memorizing some other notes. You might, for instance, just flat out memorize that that one's an E and that this one is a D, and so on. But try not to write anything down because this is a great drill to solidify your fluency with these notes. And I think that's where we'll leave it for now.